Hey, folks, welcome to InTheMoneyStocks.com's live trading action video. My name is Gareth Soloway, Chief Market Strategist here. Today's date is Tuesday, January 31st, 2017. We'll take a look at Apple, guys. Apple, again, surging over the last hour or so into earnings, and again, earnings will be released after the market closes here. And again, very nice move up here. We are seeing the markets make a very impressive move here. And again, this is led by Apple into earnings. There are obviously some positive signs here. You can see Apple hammering on this little level right here. We'll see if it breaks through. But what's interesting to me is that I'm not super bullish on earnings. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the chart of Apple, right, and we zoom out, Apple has really had a monumental move up over the last couple months. I mean, it has factored in some pretty darn good earnings. Let me put up my trend lines here so I can draw some trend lines on. One of the things that is sticking point for me is you have a trend line right here. Take a look at that. So if you connect this pivot high to this pivot high to this pivot high, you can see that is a significant resistance point, and you're just a fraction below that level. So it makes me personally wonder and think, okay, well, what is that telling me? Is that telling me that Apple's into resistance and therefore is going to sell off on earnings? And again, it's anyone's guess, obviously. We don't really know for sure until the earnings are reported and we see the price action. But for me, it definitely is something that kind of catches my eye and says, wait a minute, be a little careful here. The other factor, too, is you see this little pivot top right here. You have a little pivot top right there, and you're virtually into that as well. So there's a bunch of little factors here that are making me feel a little bit nervous. So obviously, investors late in the day, if we flip back to the intraday chart, this is a daily chart, obviously, but if we flip back to the intraday chart on Apple, there's obviously a lot of investors that are covering their shorts ahead of earnings and potentially, buying into Apple, going into earnings, thinking the earnings are going to be spectacular. Now, maybe something leaked out. That's always a possibility. But for me personally, I have to remain a little bit more cautious here. I'm not sold on it. And again, I want to wait and see exactly what ends up happening here when they report earnings. Another pretty big company reporting earnings is AMD. Let's take a look at that chart here. We'll cover that one as well. Now, AMD doesn't look too bad. All right, it's holding the 50 moving average here. It's right into the 20. You could make a case it's consolidating slightly here for a little bit of a pop. I would rank this as a neutral, maybe a small positive overall. Nothing spectacular by any stretch, but again, something that I'm just keeping my eye on overall. And again, AMD, the downside potential on this would only be to about here, so you're looking at about 870 on downside. Upside, you could probably go back to this area here, which is around 11.5. So it's about $1 upside, a little over $1 to the downside on the chart. Now, again, just going over my general prognosis, so I'm bearish on Apple going into earnings, which is kind of going counter to what the market's doing right now, right? Because it's rallying up into earnings on Apple. Apple's ripping higher towards the flat line today, but I'm going to stay with that negative bias because of the chart. On AMD, it's a lot harder for me to kind of give you a bias because there are positives and negatives. I still think it's long-term overbought, but at the same time, it does have a little bit of a bullish chart. So let's just remain neutral on that and see what happens. So negative bias on Apple into earnings and a neutral bias on AMD. There are some other companies reporting after the bell, although, again, I don't have those on my radar at this point. These are the two big ones, folks. And remember, FOMC policy statement tomorrow coming out. We also have Facebook earnings after the close tomorrow, Amazon on Thursday. So there's a lot going on out there, folks. There is a lot. All right, stay tuned. Come join us at InTheMoneyStocks.com. Again, we will be trading these earnings tomorrow in the intraday stock chat. I do have potential swing trade levels on both these stocks if they move into certain levels. So be ready, folks. Let's see what we got in store for you. Take care.